everybody, and welcome to Story Radio, the podcast for readers, writers, and lovers of literature everywhere. I'd like to introduce our first reading, Members of Dead Libraries, written by Declan Geraghty. He is a working-class writer and poet from Dublin. He's had poetry published in Shanghai Poetry Lab, Epoque Press, Militant Thistles, Cry of the Poor, and the Brown Envelope book. His latest short story featured in Lumpen London, issue 11. He has won a mentorship with Words Ireland and their national mentoring programme for new writers. He's recently won a scholarship place with the Stinging Fly Play It Forward programme and been awarded a mentorship with Skylight 47 Poetry. Declan sadly can't be here tonight, but Simon Roberts has kindly agreed to read on his behalf. Thank you so much, Simon.
I see smoke in the sky. Could be 10 miles away or 5. It was hard to tell. It was far away in the distance and had no bearing on what was happening in this area of the world. I pull up my trousers, I itch all over. I feel a pain run up my leg and down my back like an electric shock. It only happens every now and then, but when it does, it frightens me. And every time it happens, the shock is a little more intense than the last one. My stomach is aching. Last night I skinned and ate a cat. The meat tasted funny, it didn't taste like chicken at all. I hunch over as I smoke the remnants of a cigarette butt, one of many I found in the cellar of a gutted pub. The smell is putrid, but the nicotine gets into my system at least. I spit out a piece of cat meat stuck between my teeth. The morning is coming alive. I only hear it through the birds. There are no engines anymore, no horses. Sometimes on occasion there are people, but I haven't seen any in a while. Not this year anyway. Peter will be by the hill at 8 o'clock. Saint Peter they called him. That's what he said anyway. He said he had the keys. Said he was the only man capable of getting in and out of the perimeter. The only man where? I said. Well, the only man outside it, he replied. I stayed quiet, he kept his eyes on me. I've nothing to offer you, I said. Do you think I do this for material gain? He asked. I'm not sure, I said. Do you? He didn't reply. That was yesterday. Yesterday was the first time I saw a person in over a year. Well, a year by my calendar, but I think I miss a few days every now and then. Now I make my way toward the hill. The grass is higher. I can barely see the ice cream van anymore, but I don't mind, seeing as it makes me sad anyway, reminding me that something or some time has already died. I light a butt. There's not much left on it. I feel dizzy. I keep smoking while I bob my head up and down, avoiding the wind, looking out for St. Peter. I see nothing, just the breeze tilting the trees and high grass up to one side. Eventually I see a figure descend slowly down a distant hill. I'm not sure if I should meet him halfway, but stay rooted to the spot anyway. He's carrying a staff, uses it like another limb, with grace, sense, like he's been carrying it since birth. When we eventually see each other face to face, he looks disappointed. Are you ready for the suffering, brother? He says. Well, I think so, I reply. We'll begin then, he said. We walk. There's no chat. When I do say something, it's not met with a reply, just a laboured sigh as we move up higher ground. I've no butts left. I've asked him for a cigarette. I don't smoke, he says. I don't need them. The Lord is my nicotine. Sounds boring, living the pious life. But what can I do? It's not as if I can beat him to death and smoke him. I follow along, quiet, depressed, smokeless. I'm out of breath already. Do you drink? I said. He didn't reply. Do you drink? I asked again. He stopped, got his balance with the staff, then turned to me. "No," he said. He turned around and began walking again. I feel angry, but I don't say anything. "How far is it?" I said. "A few days," he replied. "A few days?" I said. "Yes, that's right. A few days," he said. "Jesus Christ," I said. "Let's not take the Lord's name in vain," he said. "Could bring us ill faith on the trail." I was with the wrong person to argue. I'd just keep my head down against the breeze and bite my tongue. If I did tell him to get fucked, he'd probably give some sanctimonious answer anyway, which would be more annoying than the walk itself. We walked like that for a few hours, heads down against the breeze. Terrain changing, sometimes for the better, sometimes worse, as we rise up hills, ones that eventually become mountains. "We'll be meeting someone over the next mountain, at the foot near the river." "A friend of yours?" I asked. "No, he'll be coming to the perimeter with us," he said. "Will anyone else be coming?" I said. "No," he said. "Just you and him." "And you, of course," I said. "And me," he replied. Up to a point. I didn't like the sound of that, but I put it behind me as the walk was grinding enough. We eventually come to the spot. "Here," he said. "We will meet him right here." The spot looked no different to any part of the stretch. There seemed as though there was no defining characteristic about the place at all, especially not for meeting. "Where's the river?" I asked. "Under our feet," he said. "And the foot of the mountain is just beyond the mist. Can you hear the river?" he said. "Listen closely and you'll be able to hear it under our feet." I agreed I could hear the water, even crouching down and putting my ear to the ground, but I couldn't hear a thing. But I didn't want to be awkward about it. He began removing utensils from inside of his shawl and without saying anything starts the process of cooking something. He is careful, meticulous with every piece of food, plate, pan and fork. Something about it is relaxing, like a ritual. My eyes are heavy, but I stay awake. I smell smoke and hear meat sizzle. He throws the top layer of meat to the ground, then spits on it. "It's the perimeter," he says. "The air, you see." "What about the air?" I said. "It's the air," he said. He didn't elaborate. "The air," I replied. "It's always the air, isn't it?" He nodded. "It's always in the air," he mumbled. I rummage in an inside pocket and light one of the butts I find. I feel a headache coming on. I keep smoking though. The saint keeps cooking. "There aren't many saints left these days to get us through the perimeter," I said. "God bless all the saints," I said. And St. Peter mumbles along, "God bless all the saints," in reply. "What saints are left?" I asked. I look up towards the sky, towards the drizzle, in thought, as the pan sizzled. "They say St. Michael is still alive, but otherwise it's just me." "What happened to them?" I said. "Was it old age?" "No," he said. "The perimeter took them." "Does St. Michael know the perimeter well?" I said. St. Peter turns a piece of meat over, it hisses in the pan. "Michael has never been to the perimeter. Just me," he replied. "Just you?" I said, surprised. "Just me," he replied. I didn't say anything else. We ate in silence, looking out at the black sky that sometimes illuminated as the embers of the fire heated and fell again. I lay my head against the bark of a long dead tree. "It's best we sleep," he said. "You'll need a clear mind for tomorrow." "Will we be nearing to the perimeter?" I asked. "Not tomorrow," he said, "but not far from the edge." "Will we start to feel it near the edge?" I said. He was silent a moment while chewing. "We will," he said. I felt a nervousness in the pit of my stomach, but I was too tired to bear the thought of it. My eyelids feel heavy, along with my muscles and mind. There's music playing somewhere. It's close. But when I feel like I'm getting closer, it changes direction, becoming a murmur, then a whisper, then when I keep walking, it gets louder again. The sun is burning my skin. There are birds in the sky of different colours, birds I've never seen before. I think I'm in the perimeter, but I'm not sure. You can hear the morning coming. It comes in different stages. The first is not a sound, just a change in texture in the blackness of the sky. The second is the sound of animals as they get deeper into the night. They call louder, as if pleading for extra hours of darkness. Even the wind sounds different as it rattles towards sunlight. Asleep, getting closer to the stage just before sunlight. I heard the sunlight looks different from inside the perimeter, but who knows? I hope to see it for myself, if I get that far. When I wake, I see the saint smoking from a pipe. He blows the smoke towards my face. Breathe deep, he said. Today will be unlike any other day you've ever lived. I get the feeling it will be, I said. You slept well, didn't you? I did, I said. Everyone sleeps well coming towards the outer perimeter, he said. Do they sleep well inside it? I asked. He didn't reply, just turned away looking towards the sky, taking deep drags from the pipe. Do they sleep well inside the perimeter? I asked him again. No, he said. They don't sleep at all. Oh, I said. I didn't push any further with questions on sleep. It was too early. I was tired, still waking up. Do you dream? He asked, his eyes still concentrated. The pot sizzled as the question ruminated with me. I don't, I said, unsure as to why I lied. Ah, he said. You will, he said. And he laughed, then went back to concentrating on the meat that sizzled on the pan. Do you think I'll come out of the perimeter? I asked. I do, he replied. You'll come out, one way or another. I laughed too, but I wasn't really sure what I was laughing at. I looked at the meat as it cooked. I had no idea what it was. I didn't bother asking. I was too hungry. We ate in silence. The saint looked toward the blackness of the night ahead of us, as if he could see an outline of something. I chewed the unidentified meat and looked out at nothingness within. When the sun rose, we were already awake, packing and ready to move. Whoever it was we were supposed to meet never shows. I feel it unwise to ask where he might be. You must do everything I say. Under no circumstances may you deviate from my instructions. If you do anything left field, the perimeter will know, said the saint. We walk. The air does me good, although the air is different here. On some stretches I feel tired, and other parts I feel rejuvenated. In the distance I see a white building. It's a library, he said. We stop here for a while. Take a book. You might need it. For the travel? I asked. No, he said. For empathy. You might need it. For the perimeter. Inside it's dark. Most of the windows are obscured, some are clear, giving an outline of the rows of bookshelves. I open a book. The Outsider by Albert Camus. I look inside at the first page of past readers that have been loaned the book. It's stamped 1989, 1993, 2005, 2017. I put it in my bag. The saint calls me. What are you doing? Taking a book, I said. Give it here, he said. He takes it, Opens the first page, he walks it towards the reception desk, stamps it and hands it back to me. I open the first page again. A new stamp etched below the rest. 2090. We're not far from the perimeter now, said the saint. Although he did say that yesterday.
Right, thank you very much. And for our next reading, I'd like to introduce Lindsay Gillespie. Lindsay was born in South Wales, lives in the South Downs. She's been a graphic designer and illustrator. She's lived in New Delhi, Washington, DC, France. She taught English in Tokyo and lots of other stuff. She writes short stories and not so short stories. She was a Costa Short Story Award finalist and a Bridport Short Story Prize finalist and lots of other things. Yeah. And
Thank you, Martin. And my story's got saints in as well.
and the library.
And the library. Oh yeah, but link and you'll miss the library is in there very quickly. Is this good like this?
Perfect.
Yeah, okay. Right, so yeah, this is a story about knowledge from another time, and it's called All Saints. It's got a lot of saints in there, even loads more than yours. Right, outside All Saints, the air's dripping with thunderflies. Inside, the triage nurse, Sister Fernanda, is scrolling breaking news. She reads out the headlines to an empty waiting room. Hospital waiting list high, highest ever. Left to rot, 92-year-old in A&E. Desperate mum smashes rotten tooth with hammer. And she glares at the empty benches. Look at us, she says. Open 24/7, fully staffed. Not a soul. Only the most desperate cases ever make it through the doors of All Saints. All Saints has been around forever, but few remember it, even fewer find it. It's a nightmare to get to. You have to catch the Valley's bopper to Pontypridd and pray the 72 is running. No service that Wednesdays, alternating Thursdays, weekends or bank holidays. You get the driver to set you down at the 5th stop and you follow the old miners track and bash your way through giant stinging nettles for half a mile. The heap of bones and stones in front of you, that'll be All Saints. A place outside of time. The doctors at All Saints are not everyone's cup of tea. Most of them look worse than their patients. Saint Drogo, for example, the patron saint of plague buboes, is no oil painting. His skin crackles and pops like pink bubble wrap. A fearsome chain smoker, Drogo has set himself and his room alight 17, 18 times now. The hospital trustees keep him on due to the crazy 5 stars he gets on ratemydoctor.com. This is because Sister Fernanda's figured out how to hack in and write fake reviews. But one more incident, says the board, and Drogo, saint or not, will be out on his fundament. Over the centuries, All Saints has been razed, rebuilt, pillaged, blown up, rebuilt again, and a maze of seething corridors is the result. At the end of each corridor, there's a saint's consulting room, and between them, the saints cover all the usual suspects. Saint Erasmus is parasites, Saint Polycarp is ENT, Saint Adjuctor is funny turns. There's no paediatrics, not anymore. Saint Philomena, the early years saint, was called back to her convent in Avellino. Baby clinic was the highlight for Sister Fernanda, and Philomena leaving has broken her heart, more than a little bit. Though it's true, a mother had to be pretty loop-the-loop to hack through a nettle forest cradling a newborn, but 1 or 2 did always brave it. The most popular consultant is Saint Fiacre. Hands like shovels, but fingers of a lace maker. In alphabetical order, he treats ball ache, cankers, erupting lesions, hemorrhoids, pubic lice, scrofula, and he's the one with the cues. Sister Fernanda decides most everything at All Saints, and this morning she pulls the bell rope to summon the saints to the library. The saints take their time drifting up. She reminds Drogo the library's no smoking. Before she's even begun, she has to poke Polycarp, whose head has slipped down his folded arms, and he's already dreaming of sleep. Tell me, she snaps, the last time any of you actually had a patient. Right, in alphabetical order. Adjutor? Let me see. Too slow. Drogo? I had a mole catcher. He presented with a nose full of maggots. He said he'd been sleeping in the forest and woke up with a wolf on top of him. Date? Michaelmas. Yeah, I reckon last year. Drogo, the last wolf, fled Wales in 1647. I know, well, a fox then, whatever. Sister Fernanda's in no mood for the blather. From her table, she looks down upon the scraped heads of the saints. Take a look around, she says, and tell me what you see. And the saints look around the library, and they look into the stained glass window that splashes rainbows over their flaking skin and their moth-eaten chemises. Drogo studies two painted ladies mating on top of a copy of hymns ancient and modern. I see the Lord's abundance, says St. Martin. I see his love for us and for all living things. Well, I see, says the Sister Fernanda, a room with 0 patients. And she opens a laptop and reads out the headlines. And there's a new one now, one that's just popped up. It says here, the old ailments are making a comeback. Gout, dropsy, crusted scabies. They're getting diagnosed for the first time since Victoria was on the throne. And they are our speciality, she says. So what are we doing hiding out in the forest when no one can find us? The saints don't say anything. They pick out patterns in the dust on the tiles with their toes. Look, today's market day. People's minds need soothing. Their bodies need mending. She starts ransacking the library books, blowing plumes of dust off the spines. 101 Ways with Weasel Testicles. Painless pustule draining. The do's and don'ts of live eel enemas. See? No one else knows what we know. Drogo traps the butterfly in one hand and opens the library door and releases them into the blue. Yeah, you can't just go springing it on her, sister. There's considerations. We've got, like security, logistic arrangements. And I've got nothing to wear, says Fiacre. Something's been at my travelling cape. And all I've got is a scrap the size of a pimple. And what if someone shows up when we're away, says Erasmus. Remember the time you lot went off to visit St. Tylo? Left yours truly to hold the fort when those woodcutters rocked up. And they'd been on the ferry caps all night. So make up your minds, Sister Fernanda says. Stand up if you're coming, or if you're staying, sit down. The saints do a bit of both, like a party game. I could, says St. Anthony, I could come and stay at the same time. And it's true, he could. St. Anthony has been blessed with the miraculous gift of bilocation, although he's never bothered to use it that anyone can recall. St. Martin stands in the middle of the waiting room, holding a dried up jam jar. It's my last one, he says. St. Martin is the All Saints leech man. Not that there's much demand for leeching, but now and again old-timers have been known to travel huge distances to see him. Drogo stands in the doorway and lights up. The saints troop out after him into the green morning. He waves his roll-up around at the living forest. It's hard to leave, that's the trouble. The saints nod. And Pontypridd on market day, says Drogo, it's dicey. Tell you what, sister, I'll go with you. Folks generally take a fancy to me. Yeah, I've got the patter, which I've cried on market days. The other saints start reminiscing about previous market days. Karaoke down the rump shaker, frog juggling, Molly Firkin and a hairy merkin. The saints interrupt each other, recalling sundry sights for sore eyes. They clutch one another, they can't stand for laughing, and then a slap of thunder cuts them short. They tumble back into the library, and lightning busts up the sky. It's just a summer storm, says Fernanda, but the saints drop to their knees, under the benches trembling, and up close, how jaundiced they look. Fernanda thinks, the cobwebby skin, the savoury pong. Drogo, will you get off my hem? Shift your backside out my face. They wait like this, all crunched and hunched, until Sister Fernanda gives the all clear, and they scuttle out, ruddled and dazed. So market day, she says. Who's on? Drogo's sitting on the floor, clutching his head. I think I've taken the head staggers. I think it was the storm, he says. Oh, thank the Lord, says Fernanda. Yeah, the storm twangs your nerves like a rubber band, says St. Martin. And I was just wondering, sister, if I can put in a request for a quart of horse leeches and 2 pints of turps and chloroform mixed. Fiacre, please. I'm running low. Last time my gentleman woke up halfway through his procedure and things got messy. And then they all join in, and he chants of a tiny drop of skull attack, sister, a pinch of smoked poppy seed, a bag of collops, but only if they've got the salted owl flavour. Anyone else fancy a takeaway? Classified drugs, booze or baccy, says Fernanda, in a neutral sounding sort of voice. Drogo leans in to whisper in her ear. You know the wall-eyed fellow at the Turk's Head? Tell him Drogo sent you. 3 quills of his best Spanish. I was just kidding, Fernanda roars, and the saints quiver. Fernanda rips open the library door. The storm's blown itself out. She looks up at the sun to calculate the time. You lot made me miss 8 o'clock, but I might just get the 8:45, and she's off. Drogo presses an ash leaf into her hand. For luck, he says, and don't forget the Turk's Head. And then she's away, skittering down the hillside. A thorn bush rears up and goes for her, stabbing holes in her veil. She elbows away through a path of hairy nettles, and for the first time ever they flex and sting her. In this part of the forest, she knows it well. It's where she and Philomena used to pick the herbs for baby clinic. All bright for red eye, loose strife for constipation, sweet fennel for gripe water. Despite the sunshine, the forest is all shivers and shadows this morning. It feels wrong. She pulls the veil tighter. There's a cry. A wail. Sounds like someone's dropped a baby. Fernanda freezes. The old vixen queen who rules the forest, it could be one of her tricks. She's only ever been in this part of the forest with Philomena, and she pretends she's here at her side. She's got an idea. She's not going to go to Ponty. She's going to go down to the docks, find a ship, and negotiate with the captain and make her way to Avellino. The saints will just have to manage. All in a rush, the forest opens up and everything is easy now, and her heart floats light as pollen. She's drunk on the decisions she's made, and she's drunk on the green incense of the forest, after the used-up air of All Saints, and the smell of the old men. Does she feel sorry for them? She does. They're saints, but they've lost their nerve. They're scared of the outside world. They only know the old ways. Time to cut them loose. The hum of the main road is louder now, and she spins down the last of the miners' track. The 72 was waiting for her at the side of the road, and Fernanda just clambers in. Pontypridd. Single or return from single, she says. Her face sparkles with sweat. She's made it. That lot with you? Asks the driver. Fernanda turns, hammering on the glass, the St. Fiacre and St. Juta, St. Martin, St. Erasmus, St. Polycarp, St. Drogo. Oh, St. Drogo's lighting up. Fernanda shuts her eyes and opens them again. The saints are still there. Drogo thumps the door and the driver clicks a button and in they burst. The saints look high. Your face, Drogo crows to Fernanda. It's a picture. Move along, gentlemen, says the driver. They don't move, but they can't. They're dazed to be out in the world of rammed Friday market buses. The driver leans across to Fernanda. Oi, Sound of Music, you in charge? We're not going anywhere till every one of your gents is sat down on their arse. Fernanda shows the saints. Fernanda shoos the saints down the bus and fiddles with the coin she's filched from the donation box. Yeah, no charge for you, says the driver. Must be a saint putting up with that lot. And the saints giggle their way upstairs. On the top deck, they pick their way exaggeratedly, holding up their skirts in case they trip. They bestow their terrible smiles on anyone who looks their way. Fiacre pauses by some bloke with a head like a boiled ham and pin eyes. Are you Peregrine Pugh, the pig man? It was Arsitch, wasn't it? I got you now. Rodent ulcer, if I recall. I had to dig it out. Any more problems, down there? Come back and see me. The pig farmer's piss-hole stare scalds Fiacre. Then the man throws his head back and roars with laughter. Bless you, St. Fiacre wobbles past. The saints are of a mind, of a mood, and are surely in the groove to bless the entire bus. Drogo sprung up down the front, fiddling with a roll-up. He asks the driver how long he's been on the buses. What's that say? The driver bangs on his no smoking, no distracting the driver sign. Yeah, apologies, just one thing. Did you see the headlines this morning? The ones saying about dropsy and gout and all the old ailments. Last warning, the driver's calling out for Sister Fernanda when the bus does a bunny hop. It jumps, it leaps, and then the driver's flying through the window. At the edge of the road, the vixen twitches. Her voodoo orange eyes blink before she turns to plunge back into the nettles. If anyone thought to ask her, she'd say, if you live in the forest, you should stay there. The old humans on the hill have been there forever, and it's her job to keep them safe among the nettles. There's a hush inside the bus. Then a sob and a cry, like a siren, and it explodes into proper wailing. The baby. The mother can do nothing. She's upside down on the floor with her face all bent. Sister Fernanda and the saints haven't got a scratch. Fernanda scoops up the baby and sets up the back seat as triage station and starts assessing who needs what. She rips a veil up to make bandages. In the road, the driver's lying on his back, his arms and legs stretched out like an angel. His eyes are open wide in surprise. Drogo is also surprised. He's trying to remember what you do. He checks the driver's breathing. He needs to breathe for the driver. He can't find the pulse. If he can remember how to do it, he tilts the driver's chin up, pinches his nose, breathes into his mouth. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 1 breath, 2. Polycarp and Ajuta are working the top deck. They stem bleeds, wrap contusions, white vomit, strap ankles. Drogo stands up. The driver is actually breathing. He checks again to be sure and goes back to the bus and asks the pig man for his jacket to keep the driver warm. Fernanda calls Martin over to look at a boy with shredded fingers. Martin extracts the remaining leech from his jar and explains to the boy what a leech can do. He tells the boy how wonderfully clever they are. They're especially clever at mending exactly the sort of wound the boy has. He can just stitch the finger and then the leech will do the rest of the work. No way, no way, no way, calls the wild-eyed boy. But his grandma knows about the old ways. He'll shut up and he'll have it, she tells Martin. The passengers are made comfortable, and it's Sister Fernanda's assessment that in the main, apart from the driver, they've been lucky. A few knocks, cuts, split lips, hematomas. The baby's mother's stopped bleeding, but her eyes are twirling around her head, and she's too shaky to hold the baby, so Fernanda keeps him clutched in her arms. She can hear the pigman on the phone. There's been an accident on the number 72, west side of the Forest Road, 2 miles north of town. Bit shook up, driver not great. God knows what happened. An operator, another thing. You might want to give the ambulance guys a heads up. There's a load of plonkers on board, running around in their 90s, causing havoc. Looks like they might have done a runner from the old asylum, you know, the one out in the forest. Fernanda stays on as long as she dares, as one by one the saints do a final check on their patients, step off the bus and slip back into the forest. She'll leave the bus too, before the ambulance arrives, but for the time being, she'll stay like this, hugging the baby. She picks at a purple rash blooming on the baby's neck. Could be cradle fester. Philomena's wormwood salt would shift it. There's nothing stopping her, Fernanda from mixing up a fresh batch. She could restart baby clinic, could do it today, starting with this little one. His hair smells of meadowsweet, and she hugs him tight across her bloodied habit, because he's the first baby she's held in such a very long time.
Next, we're going to hear from Martin Nathan, who, as most of you will know, is my co-host on Story Radio. Martin's short fiction and poetry has appeared in a range of journals, and his novel, A Place of Safety, is published by Salt Publishing. His dramatic writing has been shortlisted for the Nick Dark Award and the Woodward International Prize.
Hello, no saints, but teeth and dogs. It's called D is for Dentistry. Human Anatomy. Scott entered the library warily, thinking he might be stopped by someone demanding an identity card, but he was able to wander around unimpeded. Popular fiction, crime, thrillers, cookery, just released. Not what he wanted at all. A woman with green hair and a pumpkin outfit told a story using elaborate finger gestures, and children stared at her hands, open-mouthed, and some picked their noses, or impetigo scabs. Bearded men with grimy hands sat at tables reading newspapers or rested their heads, contributing to the background rumble of snores. Scott searched for a sign to guide him, and the library assistant at the automatic book checking system smiled. "Can I help?" she said. Polish, he thought, or Latvian, maybe Estonian. He was about to tell her the whole story, but he was in too much pain, and his voice had been affected by it. He hadn't been in a library since his school days, when the librarian had explained library cards, fines, and the Dewey Decimal Classification System to them. But who was interested in books these days? Everything was online. Except this morning, his computer search had yielded 100 answers, which were all useless, and one that helped, but included a scan from a book, 1 page, and he needed the rest. His local library had a copy, except it wasn't a library anymore, it was an idea store. He grabbed his tools and a mirror and headed down there. The library assistant directed him to the first floor, reference books, science, human anatomy, and there he found the book as promised, held it like a holy object, laid it on the floor, spread a towel, took out his tools, had a nip of scotch, and he was ready to begin. Pets. Helen was sitting in the pets section, working her way through the pile of books beside her. She needed a dog. People said to her she didn't need a dog. You might want a dog, but it's a big decision, especially after what you've been through. Don't rush into it. With so many different breeds and crossbreeds and rescue dogs, She had agreed to come with an open mind and work her way through all the books alphabetically until she'd decided. People pointed out there were new hybrids to consider, cockapoos and labradoodles and who knew what else. People were coming up with new combinations all the time. Puppy farms were producing Spaniadors and Beagle Retrievers. Maybe the ideal dog had only just been bred. She didn't want anything like that. In her heart of hearts, she knew what she wanted. It was still grieving, but if you give it time, you might find you like the freedom. She hadn't said that, but she didn't want to go on holidays or theatre trips or meals out. She just wanted another dog, and the more she flicked through the books, the more certain she was that she needed exactly the same dog as the one she had before. The same breed, the same colouring, another bitch. She would keep the same name too, because it felt natural and she already had the blanket and the bowl marked with that name. People said you couldn't really get attached to an animal the way you could a person, but they didn't understand. Now she knew what to do. She'd decided that her pain would soon be over. Then she opened the last book and gasped in horror. The image. It was her dog. A tear trickled down her cheek and her breathing became fast. The same face, the same eyes, the same fur pattern. She relived the moment of tragedy. It wasn't her fault, everyone said that. Tears dripped down her nose and onto the page, and she wiped it dry. Of course, it wasn't her dog. The fur colouring around the legs was quite different. Periodicals. Raymond sat in periodicals, flicking through the Witch magazine with all the reports on robot vacuums, inkjet printers and lawnmowers, phones of fridges and surveillance systems. It had been 5 years since he'd come here last, and he'd gone with their recommended Best Buy. Look how that had worked out. It'd been great at first. He could control everything as it promised. The house would be warm when he got home. The curtains opened and closed and sent notifications when people came to the door. He watched them make his deliveries. He couldn't really blame the system for what happened next. It was his own fault. His wife had never liked the system. Why couldn't she just control the heating herself rather than have to ring him up? He couldn't say that it was because she always turned it up too high and it was costing a fortune for just her in the house. Sometimes he turned the thermostat low to make the point and suggested she put on warmer clothes and moved around a bit more. He had no idea what she did all day. He'd been wondering about adding a video monitoring system when she moved out. It wasn't a great surprise, they weren't well suited and things had got worse and worse. Then the system went crazy. The heating would come on in the middle of the night and he would wake up sweating. Then the hot water would stop in the middle of a shower. The worst music would blast out. Thrash metal, country ballads. That was the clue. He realised he hadn't changed the admin password and now his wife had taken control of it. In the end, he gritted his teeth and called her. He agreed to meet to sort out a divorce settlement and she agreed to stop messing with the system. To celebrate, he decided to go on a date and it was all going well. He still had the power, but when they got back, the house was at 30 degrees. Is this a ploy to get me to take my clothes off? His date had said. He put on some romantic music and poured some wine. And as he opened the window, the music changed and the speakers thudded with Iron Maiden. He was speechless with anger. He had some pride left. There was going to be no more negotiation. He was going to rip that whole system out and she would pay for a new one out of the divorce settlement. Pets. Helen didn't like anything she'd seen so far. She didn't like large dogs. She wanted something that curled up in her lap or sat on the sofa next to her. And when she had to pick up after it, she didn't want some big, well, you know. She'd had 4 dogs, all the same breed, each with its own personality, its own little ways, its own arc of tragedy. Always the same name. This time it would work out. She thought about the worst moment in her life. She hadn't been concentrating. She'd tripped, stepped backwards. The dog had yelped, and from that sound she knew it was bad. Perhaps a larger dog would be more robust. A Labrador, a retriever that wouldn't get under her feet in the same way. Human anatomy. When Scott tried to get an appointment at the dentist, he didn't like the way the receptionist had stared at her nails as she told him he was no longer on their list because he hadn't been for so long. It was like he was a naughty schoolboy, and when he suggested she put him back on the list, the muscle in her cheek tightened. They might have a slot for him later in the day, but he would have to pay the new patient charge. He demanded she stop looking at her nails and listen to him, and she suggested he should leave. He was going away anyway, he said. He wasn't normally like that, but he was in so much pain. After 3 hours ringing round other surgeries, he realised he had made a mistake and went back to apologise through gritted teeth. The receptionist accepted his apology, but told him the emergency appointment had now gone. Periodicals. Raymond had explained to his dates about the problem with the control system, and she didn't care. She liked Iron Maiden and took her top off anyway. She sipped at a glass of wine large enough to mean that she wouldn't be driving home. As their bodies wrapped around each other on the sofa, he dimmed the lights. Then the curtains opened and the lights came on full brightness. D-I-V-O-R-C-E blasted out of the speakers. As his date put her top back on, he tried to explain. "Is she watching us now?" she said. The curtains twitched. "You really need to sort your life out before you start dating again." So that was what he was doing. But they had every copy of the Witch magazine except the one he wanted. He marched down to the front desk to complain. "Excuse me," the library assistant said. "I'm already helping someone." "Yes, but this is important." Human anatomy. Scott probably overreacted, but he knew the receptionist was punishing him as he walked the street, visiting every dentist, demand, plead, beg for help. No, he could not wait. He needed attention now, and he widened his search. What do you do in a dental emergency? If you're somewhere remote, in the jungle or Antarctica, on a space station, emergency dentistry, home dentistry, DIY dentistry. They said it was important to understand dental anatomy before we started because the roots go much deeper than you can imagine. The book they referenced was in the library. Periodicals. Raymond felt guilty when the woman from the front desk brought him the missing magazine. He apologised and explained his difficulties, and she seemed interested as he tried to show her his control hub, but discovered his phone had been cut off. He knew who had done it, and he tore up the magazine, laughing crazily while the library assistant rushed downstairs to get help. Pets. Helen lay on the floor weeping in the circle of books. She didn't deserve a dog. She would have to rely on her memory. She tore the page out of the book, and when she kissed it, the wrong dog with the wrong fur stared back at her. She was dangerous. She couldn't look after another living creature. Human anatomy. The library assistant returned with her colleague, but Raymond had gone now. She tidied up the magazine fragments and put the folder back on the shelf. She saw all sorts there, day after day. She heard a choking sound and then a scream, and they rushed through to human anatomy, where a woman was sitting, rolling on the floor, and a man had blood pouring down his front as he held up a broken tooth in a pair of pliers, grinning triumphantly. Thank you. We're going to have a break for a few minutes now. Okay, we're going to start the second half, and we have Simon Roberts returning to read his own piece now. Simon is based in West London, writes short fiction, flash fiction. His short story, Dirty Chicken and Rice, was a 2024 Plaza Prizes finalist. His adaptation of The Streets of Solitude was produced by Questas Theatre in 2024, and he was a finalist in this year's Fish Flash Fiction Prize. Thank you, Simon.
So, this is a story called, there's no saints, there's no libraries, but it does involve books. And it's called, Does the World Really Need Any More Novels? And here to help me read it is Janan Ron. Yes, Paula, the Shakespeare was a dive, but at least it had a great jukebox. You know how I feel about jukeboxes, Paula. Pubs too, but mainly jukeboxes. I'll come back to the jukeboxes when I get to the end of whatever this turns out to be. Story, flash, memoir, whatever. Not a novel. Don't worry. So, you said...
Tell me, does the world really need any more novels?
And I said, you mean there are already too many novels?
Too many bad ones. I don't mean to imply that yours is that bad.
That bad? Wow, thanks, Paula.
Don't be touchy. I haven't even read it. How would I know if it's even good?
It's not your sort of thing, I've told you. Anyway, asking if the world needs more novels is a career-ending question for the chief fiction buyer.
I was playing devil's advocate.
Playing. Publishers' reps broke into a cold sweat at your sulphurous way with the contents of a presentation file. There he would stand, the poor shiny suit, listening to your every no with each flick of the page and watching his commission turn to ashes. Okay, Paula, so you think the world does need more novels?
Not exactly.
It doesn't need any more of that Suffolk Victoriana you're so fond of. You eyed me over the rim of your glass.
Tom, you are writing a novel, aren't you? Why the smirk?
Reminds me of that Private Eye cartoon.
I don't know it.
I didn't think you would. Watching your reaction to anything funny is like seeing the corrugated iron shutters rattle down over the shop front at close of business. I told you anyway. I was feeling reckless. Two literary wannabes in a pretentious bar. One says, I'm writing a novel. The other says, neither am I.
Don't get it.
Never mind.
We're not even in a pretentious bar.
I fumbled in my pocket for coins. Let's have a tune, for Christ's sakes. Any requests?
Someone with a proper singing voice.
It's not that sort of jukebox. There were 3 reasons for my existence back then. The Rocola, you, and my novel. In that order. I used to think the Rocola had got there first, and the Shakespeare had somehow moulded itself around her. She looked gorgeous. She sounded beautiful. There was barely a dud in all the songs she could sing. No Bohemian Rhapsody, no Hotel California, none of that crap. She had Dylan, she had Mitchell, she had Costello, she had Waits, she had taste. That evening I stood in front of her and stared deep into her polished chrome. And all I could see was you, Paula, as I'd seen you earlier when I turned up for my shift. You were outside contemplating one of the window displays. Toby, our oleaginous leader, Tool for short, was standing right behind you looking at your neck, Paula, your neck. You know what Tool once told me? That train spotting owed more to Faulkner than to Burroughs. You know what else? That his book of the year was an account of Viennese coffeehouse culture at the turn of the 18th century. He ate things like polenta, and he smoked gitane, and dug Miles Davis. What a creep. Why couldn't you see that, Paula? Or maybe it was his very creepiness that you found irresistible. Had he been looking at your neck, Paula? Or the dimple in the back of your grey cardigan? The dimple that showed where you carelessly slung it over a hook? The dimple that showed you weren't nearly as perfect as I hoped you were, and knew you couldn't possibly be? Where was the hook, Paula? On the back of your bedroom door? Or his? I stared harder into the chrome. My parted curtain of lank Iggy Pop hair revealed a blob of uncooked dough and a snout poppy-seeded with blackheads. I could even see my own smell, a sour pong from a day carting boxes into the service lift, a pong badly hidden behind an expensive armpit-stinging deodorant bought to impress you. I will never have you, I thought. As I thought this, I forced my coins one by one into the slot of the Rocola. When I returned, you said,
I'm not sure if need is the right word.
So what is the right word?
Put it this way. If someone, Jermaine Greer, say, said, that's it, no more novels, we don't need any more, people stopped writing, actually stopped writing novels,
then you and me would be done for. We'd be finished.
Then, Tom, the reaction would be like, oh, what the hell? No more novels? So it's not so much about whether we need more novels.
But you said...
Listen, I mean, look, no, I don't think we do need more novels. But we need the chance of there being more novels, right? Plus, somewhere in the slush pile, you know, there might be a few good ones. Possibly even yours.
Cheers, Paula. Wow. Really encouraging.
It can't be encouraging if you won't show me anything.
Like I said, it's not your sort of thing. And I do show you stuff. I remember your hatchet job on my last story.
That? I just didn't think it was cooked through enough.
Cooked through? What, you mean like polenta? You gave me a curious look as if to say, why polenta of all things? I nearly blurted out, that underdone story, it was for you. It was meant for you. I dedicated it to you. But then Robert Wyatt tremored his cry of liberation from the Ricola. At last I am free. I can hardly see in front of me. I can hardly see in front of me. In that moment, Paula, I suddenly longed to be free of your joylessness, your dislike of my writing. I yearned to be liberated from my own pathetic want of you.
Did you put this on?
Yes.
Why? You know I loathe this man's voice. Don't tell me you put it on deliberately.
I put it on deliberately.
I'm going, Tom. I really don't know why you're in such a foul mood.
I'm not, Paula, wait.
I've got to go, or I'll be late.
Late for what?
Date. Proper one.
I looked at you. My hand held tight to the little there was left. Then I said, I couldn't help it, Italian cornmeal and bebop.
Come again?
My fingers splayed open, releasing you into the wild. Do give my regards to Tool.
To who?
Toby. Tool. Didn't you know my nickname for him?
And you're a rusty nail. Screw you!
Screw you. Your very last words to me. A month later, you disappeared to manage an independent. A month after that, Tool oiled his way into an editor's job at some slick new publishing house. Does he still keep vigil over the fine curve of your neck? Paula. The Shakespeare's all boarded up. The Ricola is no doubt giving vacuous credibility to some hipster-friendly joint in Shoreditch. At least it once granted me my Robert Wyatt freedom. I completed a second draft of that novel, The Other Reason for My So-Called Existence, and I deleted it. Why? Because the world doesn't need more novels. But the chance of more novels, or half-baked conversations in pubs about whether the world needs more novels. The world doesn't deserve more novels. Why? Here's why. Because the world is now a lumbering, blundering thing. It's hump-backpacked and snot-sniffing and headphoneless. It's tunnel-eyed to the cell phones implanted onto its still bleeding stumps. The world is a too plastic-clogged, too cooked-through place for novels to tell it this much truth about itself. The world is so cooked through that it's black enough to cut into squares. That's what cooked through really means, Paula. Here's the ending, Paula. The ending to whatever the hell this is. The last thing I'll ever write. Promise. It's this. What the world needs, what it desperately needs, is more jukeboxes. Jukeboxes full of warped old songs. You see, Paula, songs are better than novels. They sound better. You can dance to them if you want. Also, they're shorter, which, given time's running out, is a pretty important consideration, don't you think? Songs will help us drown out the cracking of the ice, the cracking of the earth. My own cracked voice, literally cracked voice. Robert Wire, to me, we can never be truly free, Paula. Our vision's too blurred from the very thing we've loosened hold of, Paula. I've let slip away, Paula. Have lost, Paula.
Thanks so much, Simon. That was great. Now we're going to hear from Martha Statuary. Martha Statuary is an events producer living and working in London. She studies creative writing part-time at Birkbeck University and has worked as a researcher on creative non-fiction projects, including Kate Summerscale's The Book of Phobias and Manias, commissioned by the Wellcome Foundation. The library explores the transformation / decline of a university library through the eyes of a librarian working on the special collections floor.
The library. From her pew, looking over the counter at the desk next to aisle J, Margaret could tell that something about Lisa was different. For one thing, it was 11 a.m. already, a late start. This kind of leniency was usually saved for later in the term and the weeks after a major submission. The librarian had been flicking her eyes to the stairwell since 8:30, uneasy with her morning's work whilst Lisa was missing. But Margaret's most dependable student had finally arrived, peeling off her running shoes and, as if reading the concern straight from the librarian's brain, checking the clock and shaking her head at the hours already lost. Margaret tutted silently, absorbing some of her stress. It was infectious when she did this, Lisa, seeming more than ever like a dog chasing her own tail as she stared up at the timekeeper. That clock kept her chained up to a railing whilst all her fellow students seemed free to shop for pleasure. Last term, it had gotten much worse in the week or two before her exams, and Margaret only knew roughly when these had been. She'd never asked directly. At these crux points, Lisa's phone would be switched off vigilantly by 8 a.m, and so she'd look up at the clock even more than normal, unconsciously compensating herself for the denial of those screen-clicking instincts. Then her day of revision would end and she'd turn her phone back on, scroll through the notifications for a while. What kind, Margaret wondered, who from? Today, Lisa was breathless, and it wasn't from the stairs up. There was a sheen across her face and a finality to the way she sat down, exhaled, rubbed her eyes with both hands. Was she planning to study all day like that, without a shower? More irregularity. Lisa usually came in before she'd been running, with sleepiness still in her eyes and no sweat anywhere. On the contrary, she often seemed completely pallid, save for some irritation, a small spot breakout here and there. Today, sweat shined her face and the roots of hair that were scraped away from her scalp with a tie. Her legs were veined, strong blue lines representing thousands of miles of movement. Lisa had been sitting in that exact desk, 4 or so metres from Margaret's own, since the first week of her first term. She'd found her way to Margaret's floor and never left. Margaret thought that floor 3 selected for a particular seriousness. In any university library, the graduations from level to level, first to second, second to third, were visualisable as rungs of dedication that separated the most studious from the rest. The higher you rose, gravitating towards the must of the quieter rooms, the more interesting you became to the librarian. When she'd been hired 20 years ago, special collections had been on the first floor, but the ecosystem was entirely different now. Nowadays, most of the first years never made it past ground level, where the buzz of the cafe prevented any real work from happening. To stay on floor 0 was to inhabit the energy of the revolving doors that framed the space. Hovering around in there, you refused yourself a full transition from outside. You kept one foot in the idea of studying and the other in the thought of your evening plans. A few made it to the second floor, where a shiny central mezzanine had just reopened. When the estates team had been searching for financial backing for the refurb, the bank who had signed on to sponsor it had lots of aesthetic stipulations. Cheryl, head of community engagement for the bank, had been more specific about the whole process than the library team had expected. The bank wanted references to Greek amphitheatres, allusions to the timelessness of knowledge transfer. The results had been less inspiring than the architecture of the forefathers, but there was a communality to the layout. It was sociable, and adopted largely by humanities undergrads. Many of them, after catching illnesses and anxieties from each other in the first weeks of living together, could be found sitting, damp hair, waiting for the appearance of any new, just met or just slept with characters who could steer them away from actually studying. And then there was her floor, hers and Lisa's, special collections. The antiquarian stuff was Margaret's favourite. She checked those drawers compulsively every night before she went home. 500-year-old drawings of botanicals that still looked like photographs to her, until your nose was pressed up right against them, betraying the tiny strokes that made up the whole. There was the stuff from the private collections, like the 20th century erotica. Students weren't allowed to remove any of the collections from the library. Age and sensitivity prevented it. Margaret remembered when they'd first digitised the collections on her floor, when it had become clear that people weren't that willing to make the journey for the read. They'd left the erotica out of the process, deeming it too spicy for submission to the online platforms. Margaret remembered the time an anthropologist had come in to inquire about the private case on the only day that she'd broken the rules by taking it home to read herself. The miniatures had a dignified comedy about them, she thought. They possessed some ridiculous accolades that nonetheless demanded respect. The smallest version of Dante's Divine Comedy in the world. The smallest authorised version of the King James's Bible. One girl, a master's student, about 3 years ago, had withdrawn that one. She planned to replicate it for an art project that involved building dolls' houses with evangelical decor. Margaret sometimes wondered how that final piece had been received. Margaret liked to make little bets with herself about the next time that someone would actually take out a third floor book. There were lots of reasons for the reduced footfall. For one thing, a large number of the internationals were choosing to stay abroad now. There were new questions every week about their visas, how long they'd be able to stay and work in the country after graduation. The qualifications themselves were also thinning and shrinking. Every year there were fewer offerings, shrivelled routes of inquiry. When they'd closed the religious studies and the comparative philosophy MAs last time, Margaret had visualised the decision as a layer of dust over shelves E to J. And now the buildings themselves had come to stand, inanimately, for faraway events. The institution's friendships, cloud computing partnerships with Israeli-owned companies, publicised like sordid affairs, priced half-naked out of the shadows and into the light. A supply chain of mortality tied to the bricks and mortar where she worked. When the encampment had been erected outside the library all those months ago, it hadn't had the air of permanence. But all these months later, the protesters were still always there. The time of day or night held no weight. There was a back entrance for staff, so Margaret wasn't forced to confront it that often, but it was different for the students themselves. Margaret could see them crossing over to the other side of the street, heading for a cafe instead of the library entrance, wanting to put physical distance between their comfort and the confrontation of distant sufferings. Lisa was pulling a pencil case out of her bag. It was translucent purple. Margaret remembered her own trip to Paper Chase after accepting her place at Reading in the 80s. 4 biros, 3 ink pens, a pencil and a sharpener, all enclosed in a pink cotton case. Each piece of stationery was heavy with the expectation of things not yet learned. Margaret remembered rationalising different uses for them all. The more serious things, lectures, tutorials, would get the close attention of the ink, with the biros saved for things like revision. She'd come back to work at the same library because it had felt connected with her first moments doing anything interesting. University for her had felt like door after door opening onto an improved personality, a chrysalis with the characters of herself and her friends. Here was an intellectual playground where politics felt more than policy, felt like the promise to listen, to find things interesting even when they didn't make you any money. The value that this created was widely accepted. It was a value that served to underpin everything: markets, relationships, in the lives that people went on to live when it was over. Now it seemed like the personality evolution part of it was more optional. The whole university experience seemed, from a distance, more liminal, a way to reduce friction on the journey to a job. Margaret looked over at Lisa and could see in the girl's pencil case the identity markers of all her clothing and routines, similarities with her young self. But how did it feel to be subscribing to this place now, when the big ideas were hollowing out? In this new world, Margaret wondered what the sights of Lisa's own revelations would be. Those moments where you feel yourself outgrowing your own certainties and stepping into new knowledge. She supposed they could take place anywhere, they need not be here. Watching the student with a tenderness, the kind grown from silent proximity, she could only hope that such moments would be plentiful for her wherever they happened.
Right, and now we've reached our last piece. So I've lost my
It's
notes. Yeah. Tabitha is a short story writer and a co-host of this event. Her novel is coming out next year with sorry, I can't read this. It's too with
Rowan Prose Publishing.
yeah, Rowan sorry, you should do this. Rowan Prose Publishing, and yeah, she received an honourable mention in the Alpine Fellowship Writing Prize for her story Poppet, and thank you, Tabitha.
Thanks, Martin. This is a flash fiction piece written for this event. It's called The Hum. It was on the fourth day that the building stopped humming. It sat in an unregarded street on the edge of an unloved town, squat, grey and utilitarian, resembling a hangar in an industrial park, except for the acres of land that backed onto it, filled with crops that only an expert eye would recognise as not quite like any others. You might have noticed that the hum had stopped if you walked by it every day. The sound resembled the humming of bees in a giant hive, but in fact it was the sound of the many fans that kept the seeds at an optimum temperature, stopping them from spoiling in the metal drawers and drums where they slept. Scientists occasionally removed a batch of seeds, propagated them in test tubes or seed trays, pollinated them, grafted them, or peered through microscopes at their intricate whorls and spirals. Sometimes, not always, they would be planted in the regimented fields outside with their high walls. These were the safe plants, the ones whose genetic material was certain not to escape or mix itself with others. But after the Mad King's decree, the library was forced to shut down. All the scientists, some old, some young, men and women, were escorted out of the building, balancing brown cardboard boxes in their arms, some in tears, some stoic. The door was locked and bolted. A security guard patrolled the empty lot, an Alsatian watchful at his heels, but sometimes there were still glimmers of light on the top floor. Perhaps the building was not as empty, as abandoned as it seemed. In the nighttime hush, perhaps there was something moving. You started to notice, a few weeks later, a shock of bright colour on the motorway verge, where no one ever walked. On the pavement, an unusual bright green arching root thrust its way through the tarmac and began to climb into the air. In a broken down street, where men sat in cars with dark windows, or furtively passed parcels and cash from hand to hand, a tree sprang up and spread its giant white petals everywhere, dropping like snow, its perfume so rich and strange that even those hardened men stopped to smell the flowers, inhaling each one deeply, as if the flower itself were a drug. Rubbish piled high on street corners everywhere, rats scuttled in and out of the drains, masked militia roamed with guns at the ready, looters smashed the windows of the few remaining stores. The currency had fallen to a new low, and now this. The roots, the leaves were encroaching everywhere. They were twining around your window. They crept into the brickwork. They whispered into your dreams. They were tearing up the motorways, buckling the airport landing strips. The authorities realised too late They sent out men in tractors, men with vats of chemicals, men with flamethrowers, but the flowers were implacable. They took over the courthouses and the town hall, their sinuous curves as powerful and improbably beautiful as a serpent's coils. The masonry crumbled. They grew too fast, they were too strong. Sometimes their suckers or feelers reached out for you as though they yearned for your touch. The flowers were almost like faces. The two dark patches on their velvet petals seemed to stare. They turned to follow you as you walked past, to ask you who you were, where you were going, what did you dream of, because you did begin to dream. As their melancholy perfume rose over the town, a strange lassitude descended upon you. At first you fought it. You went to the office as usual, walking under the dim green canopy that now stretched from building to building, but as you sat in front of your computer, hearing it strike its familiar start-up tone, your eyelids began to droop. Now you held your lost lover in your arms in a sea of white orchids. You didn't want to leave him ever. When you finally woke up, your limbs were heavy, but your pain was gone. You ate less, you drank less, you wanted less, you needed less. No one drove anymore. The streets had buckled. The train tracks were a forest of green. The animals began to return. On your windowsill, when you woke briefly, sated with dreams and strangely calm, you found tiny jewel-like birds had built a nest. It was surrounded by plaited green strings, as though the plants were protecting the minuscule eggs within. Now, the mad king slumped on his golden throne, a glimmering thread of spittle hanging from his mouth. His courtiers lie around him, felled by the flowers. It almost looks as if they are becoming plants themselves. Their skin has a green and waxy look, their faces have an ashen pallor, the sockets of their eyes are darker, less human than before. The sound of gunfire, which has filled the streets for months now, has stopped. You smile as you open your window again, to hear the whir of the wings of the hummingbirds as they feed from the flowers. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been wonderful having you all here and hearing your stories, and just want to say a big thank you to all of you. Round of applause.
Thank you, Martin.
You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you.